Welcome to a new episode of Anita's Daily. Today I'm really excited because I have two special guests, Valeria and Alana. Both of them are specialists in literature. Before starting, I want to thank today's sponsor, La Librería Internacional, which gave us a 20% discount code in Shakespeare's books. Go buy Romeo and Juliet for a good price with the discount code Anita Book Lover. Let's get a closer look about this incredible writer. William Shakespeare was an English poet, playwright, and actor. He was born on April 26, 1564 in England, and Shakespeare is widely regarded as the greatest writer in English language. But have you ever heard this unsolved theory that Shakespeare isn't the real author or even didn't exist? But I mean, why would you even suspect that Shakespeare didn't exist?
Hi Anita, thank you for having us.
Well, to answer to your question, first of all, there's a lack of direct evidence linking William Shakespeare of Stratford to the works attributed to him, and also there are no surviving manuscripts of his handwriting.
There are also inconsistencies in his spelling and the name variations in which he signs his works.
Also, what a lot of people question is that his educational background just is not in accordance to the knowledge and the language skills that even characterize his plays and novels.
Oh, that actually makes sense and is really interesting. But I'm a little confused because I have another perspective of who was William Shakespeare. For example, from what I know there are various legal and official documents that link Shakespeare to the real authorship of the plays and poems of this time. That also means that he was acknowledged as a playwright and poet by his contemporaries. And we also get to know that all of his diverse works were really consistent in the way of the education and life experience. So that's what I think about William Shakespeare, but if he isn't the real author, who could it be?
Well, I'm glad that you asked because, in fact, I have a theory that Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, was the real Shakespeare. Because, first of all, there's a lot of similarities between diverse life experiences and events in Shakespeare's plays. For example, the comparison between Polonius in Hamlet and Lord Burghley, who was de Vere's father-in-law. For example, in a part of Hamlet, Polonius sends a servant to spy on his son while he is away at university, just as Burghley did with de Vere at one time. And there are more similarities like this between Polonius and de Vere's father-in-law. And also, Hamlet was published until after Burghley's death. Another fact about de Vere was that he was known as a secret writer who didn't allow his works to be published under his name. In fact, Francis Mears, who was an English churchman and author, said that Edward was one of the best writers of comedy, yet no comedies are known under his name. And this is when it comes the name Shakespeare as a pseudonym, because in fact pseudonyms were really common in the Elizabethan era, like almost every writer used one at one time or another, because for example a person could be punished for saying things that displeased the authorities. And for de Vere, as a nobleman who had a really important reputation and name and family to take care for, was like a pseudonym was really useful. Even more because poetry was considered frivolous and plays for the public stage were considered beneath a nobleman's dignity, of course. Well, as you can see, there's a lot of similarities and coincidences between de Vere's life and Shakespeare's works, and considering all the reasons why we think William Shakespeare of Stratford wasn't really the author of Shakespeare's works, Edward de Vere is a really good candidate.
Oh yeah, that does make sense, but I have another theory that I'm personally more convinced of. It's the Marlowe one.
Oh, another one? Then explain it to me.
Well, the similar writing styles between Shakespeare and Marlowe are just impossible to ignore. striking similarities in their writing styles, not only in their linguistic patterns but also in vocabulary and thematic elements found in their works. Christopher Marlowe was also known to have received a classical education at Cambridge University, whereas Shakespeare, well, like we mentioned before, didn't receive such formal education and was way more limited. So it wouldn't make sense that a person with such limited knowledge could possibly write such amazing works. The depth of the knowledge and classical references in Shakespeare's works are more consistent with Marlowe's educational background. There is also the interesting factor of the timing of Marlowe's death. He died in 1593, but I personally believe this was a fake death. I believe he did this to escape the persecutions for his alleged heretical beliefs. He was facing accusations of atheism, heresy, and blasphemy, charges considered treasonous and likely to lead to his execution.
So it really wouldn't be weird for Marlowe to adopt a pseudonym.
For example, one like Shakespeare. So, coming back to my argument, why did I mention the timing? So, William Shakespeare was born as an author shortly after Marlowe's death. The work Venus and Adonis was registered anonymously on 18th of April in 1593, and the first recorded purchase was on the 12th of June 1593. Less than a fortnight after Marlowe's apparent death, marked the first appearance of the name William Shakespeare in any literature or theoretical context.
Well, now that I have heard these theories, I'm really shocked. I would not have thought about the possibility of another identity of Shakespeare. I see why these theories have been considered at some point, but there's no answer yet. I think all of these speculations are invalid because there's a big lack of information. Sure, they have some points that actually make sense, but at the same time, I think I'd rather to accept the traditional arguments for the authorship of Shakespeare's works, attributed to William Shakespeare of Stratford. Why? Well, as I mentioned before, because of the contemporaries' reference, numerous contemporary references as the author of the plays and poems attributed to him, as well as evidence living in Stratford where he was born and involved in the local community, such as marriage or property ownership. And some persons like Ben Jonson or John Hemmings praised him as a playwright and poem. Also, the consistency of style, themes, and use of language suggests a single author. And lastly, I think, as you mentioned, there are some alternative candidates, but none of them have been able to provide sufficient evidence to support their claims. This makes me continue believing in the traditional attribution to Shakespeare, but I'm not going to ignore the fact that there could be other possibilities. What makes me want to read more about this author. Remember to use the code AnitaLovesBooks for a 20% discount on Shakespeare's books.